Hello and welcome to Beebe Book Buzz. I'm Karen Stern from the reference desk of the library, and this is our special Beach Reads edition of the program, which means that we have all put together themed lists for great summer reading books for you. The lists are available both online and that's at wakefieldlibrary.org, and they're also in paper form at the library along with the display of the books that you can come and visit and choose from. 6 librarians have produced lists, and 5 of us are here today to talk to you about them. So we'll each tell you a little bit about the theme of our lists, and then we will talk about one of our favorites from that list, and then we'll have some time at the end to talk about a few more. So first I want to introduce everybody over on the couch here. We have from the reference department Beth Radcliffe and Jeff Claves, and we have our assistant director Jackie Powers, and with me over here is Brigid Black, also from reference. And we're going to start today with Jeff, who has some very exciting summer movie magic to share with us.
Yes, actually, so my list, the theme for my list this summer is things, they're not necessarily new books. Some of them are recent and some of them are old, but they're all things that are being either turned into full-length feature films or in a couple of cases TV series. That are coming out during the year. So there's some classics like Little Women that's coming out around Christmas time. They're redoing David Copperfield for the first time in a long time. Oh. There's also a few like recent bestsellers and thrillers like Woman in the Window is being turned into a film, and also
that'll be great.
Bernadette, Where'd You Go, Bernadette?
Oh, yeah.
That's going to have Cate Blanchett as Bernadette, so that should be pretty interesting. So there's a good variety of things. And the one I wanted to kind of highlight to start is the Goldfinch, which, my notes here, which actually came out several years ago. It was published in 2013. It was a huge bestseller at the time, really popular. It was one of my favorite books from that time period. For those of you who don't know Donna Tartt, she wrote The Secret History and also The Little Friend, and she's kind of known for going a very long time, like a whole decade, between each book that she writes. So this one was a long time coming and sort of very anticipated. And it also won the Pulitzer the following year. It's quite a book. So it's good for the summer because it's one of those big summer projects. It clocks in at almost 800 pages. But I know you and I both read it like unbelievably quickly. Yeah. The first 100 pages are, I could not put it down during that time period. It was like, I had to finish the first 100 pages or so because it's like a roller coaster and you can't get off. It's a coming of age story. It's about a 13-year-old boy, and he is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York with his mother, and there's a terrorist attack. And there's mayhem. His mother ends up dying in that attack. And that's what that first 100 pages or so that I said, it's all just like relentless movement and emotion. It's riveting. And that sort of sets the stage for the rest of the book, which is his life going on for the next 10 or 20 years at least. The Goldfinch of the title is that in the bombing, the aftermath of the bombing, there's a very small painting that he sees in the rubble. And it's of a goldfinch. It's a Renaissance painting from one of the, and actually this is true in real life. There was an artist who was a protege of Rembrandt, and he was a real artist, and although the Goldfinch painting is fictional, it was supposedly done by this artist, and he steals the painting from the museum and the rubble. And it kind of, it becomes a symbol of hope, and it also steers his life for the next 2 or 3 decades, because everything in his life revolves around this painting. He ends up going to live with a very wealthy friend and his family in New York. He falls in love. He moves to the other side of the country and ends up in Las Vegas with another friend. And his mother is dead, of course, and his father has always been kind of absent and useless. And he comes back into his life. So it's, everything just sort of unwinds slowly, but everything goes back to the painting in the whole book. And eventually he gets drawn in because of this to the art world and the art crime world. So there's art theft and all kinds of stuff. It's the writing is mind-blowing. I can't say enough about how amazing this book is. And of course they're turning it into a film which comes out this fall. and it's got Nicole Kidman and also Sarah Paulson, who's been really popular in a number of things recently. And you may not have heard of the kid who's going to play Theo, the protagonist. His name is Ansel Elgort. And you won't know his name, but you've seen him because he was in all of the Divergent series. He was also in Fault in Our Stars, and he was the lead in Baby Driver, if you saw that.
Yeah.
So he's a Dutch actor, and I think he'll be really good. So I'm really curious to see how they take this monumental book, but with some really good actors. And
But there's a lot of stuff that happens in
there's
it,
a lot of
so,
stuff that
yeah,
happens. So
yeah.
it'll be
Right.
interesting to see how they're able to distill the important parts of it out
Yeah.
into a feature film. But with actors like that, I think
So
it
is
should be
this-
pretty good.
Is this a book that's action mixed with character?
Oh, it's all.
It's everything. It's
It's
800
everything.
pages.
Yeah, it's the writing is. If you've read anything of hers before, it's just everything is tightly wound. But yes, the characters, mainly him, and seeing him grow and change, and all the constellation of people around him. I think a lot of people have compared it, and I think this is true, to Dickens. You know, if you
Right.
think of something like David Copperfield or Great Expectations, where there's a main character who you watch going through his life for a very long period of time, and there's all these people that come and go and affect him in different ways, but there's a thread that ties
Right.
it all together.
Right.
So it's kind of like that in some ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good one. Sounds
Great book.
exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm
I
looking
haven't
forward
read
to
the
it.
book, so I should probably read that
Read the book
maybe this
first.
summer
Yeah.
and then
Start
watch
now.
the movie this fall. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
You're
along
going
with
on vacation, right?
all the other things. Yeah. Okay. So,
Brigid.
Brigid.
That's me. So my list is speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, dystopia, utopia, near future. It covers a really broad range of things, some of which are quite far out there and some of which are more close to home and relatable. If you like The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu or The Handmaid's Tale, the book, that is a kind of speculative fiction that is very more close to our, present. But it can also encompass things like Star Wars is speculative fiction. The book that I'm going to talk is sort of more towards the very far out there kind
A bit
of,
farther,
of speculative fiction. It is Saga. So Saga is actually a graphic novel series. It is about halfway through its run, according to the authors. They say they're about halfway through. They've been on a break for a little while. They're about to come back. So an excellent time to catch up on the first half.
How many of them are there so far?
So now there are 9 volumes or 54 single issues. They want to make 108 single issues or 18 volumes.
They are slim volumes.
They are
They're
slim.
Not, they're not
yeah, they're
huge.
about
Perfect for the
150 pages a piece. And obviously they are fully illustrated because they are comics. So they're not, you can read one in about an hour. But they're so full of plot and everything.
Adventure.
An adventure, exactly. So I will say, let me give you a little description of what it is about. So Saga is an apt name for the sprawling tale of a family on the run across the universe. It's written by Brian K. Vaughn and drawn by Fiona Staples. And as one review says, Saga is a science fiction in the Star Wars space opera tradition of the genre. By that I mean there isn't any science. Rather, the story just happens to be set in space with rockets, laser guns, and plenty of other imaginative bits and pieces, including lion cats, ghost babysitters, and a rocket tree powered by magic. This is true. So the main characters are Alana and Marco, who are soldiers on opposite sides of a war that's been going on for generations between the planet Landfall and its moon Wreath, but has grown to include most of the galaxy. Landfall and Wreath have outsourced the war from their own homes and populations and brought in sort of a war coalition that involves a lot of people. Vaughn and Staples avoid a good versus evil plot. Like, there's not one side didn't start the war, one side isn't the aggrieved party. If there was at some point, it doesn't matter anymore because it's been going on so long that everyone has committed atrocities. Everyone has done wrong, and it should just end, but it doesn't end. I could spend a long time just introducing the characters. I won't. I'll spare you that time. But I will say they're all brought to life by Fiona Staples' art. she's so good at drawing facial expressions, but also vast drawing, vast like galaxy spanning battles and all those things, that it all comes to life and you see the movement of characters even though it's only still patterns. I have a few sort of examples if you'd like to see. I'll hold them up. This is Alana and Marco and their baby Hazel. She's a newborn for most of the beginning. At this point, this is a later bit. She's grown up to be sort of a elementary school age child. They're pursued by bounty hunters from both sides, including the Will, who is accompanied by the aforementioned lying cat. He says lying when people are lying. And
that's a very handy
it's
skill
a very
to have,
good
yeah.
thing to have, right? And a robot from Landfall's work. His name is Prince Robot. He has a television for a head. And that's really what you also get, such imaginative drawings and
such beautiful colors.
Yeah, and such beautiful colors. I think
Really
that
rich.
Hands colors.
yeah, these prints don't really give justice to the actual art. This is the ghost babysitter, Hazel. She's only half of a person. She's a ghost.
Sounds like there's a lot of nice humor in this.
Yeah,
too.
that's really the thing. Is
Great.
it's both incredibly dark in ways and very funny and really amusing. Another review I thought actually put it best, which is Saga is about having a baby and how wonderful and terrifying and insane that can be, and it's about how families form across generations, sometimes beyond borders or even blood, and how they work together. The allegiances shift, so characters will start as enemies, they'll become friends, reluctant allies, and family as time goes past, and then they can also go back to being enemies. And it's really important to emphasize how much like there are life and death stakes in this. Like if a character dies, they're dead. They don't come back. It's not like a superhero
These
book
are not
where
the zap, pow,
yes.
zing kind of comics.
And that leads to my final point that's very important to understand, that this is definitely for mature audiences in the sense that both there's graphic on-screen violence and sex like on the page, but in a very real sense that it's about things that adults care about. It's not about it's not for children, it's for adults. It's about being a family, it's about having a baby, it's about how you change and grow and become an adult and who you are. And it's an incredibly rewarding journey, so I recommend it.
Saga, I love them. They're
Actually,
great.
Ari, my son, loved them.
Yeah, they definitely have me hooked, and I find it hard to love lots of graphic novels. I mean, I think they're beautiful, but I don't always get into them, and these just brought me right in. They're very, very.
And they introduce new people all the time. Like I think that's also, you don't get bored because there's like new characters, new concepts, new places.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and we're gonna move on to Jackie.
Oh, I'm going to just drag you right back to earth. But in a good way.
In a good way.
In a good
It's
way.
all about food for you.
Yes. So my list is Tastemakers, a buffet of culinary reads.
Who thought of that
Come
title?
up with that
I did
title
not.
yourself?
I did not have anything to do with it. But so a lot of the list is not a lot. There's some cookbooks, some just straight up cookbooks that are coming up, either just come out or are coming out soon. That I enjoy, from authors I enjoy, from chefs I enjoy. I haven't, because they're new, I haven't tried all of them, so I can't say the recipes work, but they're from trusted sources. There's also a couple food memoirs in there, and then there's a couple books that are, the food isn't really the point, but they end up kind of central to the plot. And the one I'm going to talk about is that kind of book. It's Peter Mayle's My 25 Years in Provence. And he's really a kind of he's like a travel writer, but not exactly because he lives there.
More than that.
He's British. He and his wife went on vacation to Provence and just loved it and went back and moved in like a year later. And that was in the early 90s. And so he lived there for 25 years, and I discovered, accidentally as I was reading this, I kind of flipped back to look at the author photo, and it said, he died in January 2018, and I was like, oh my God, he's dead. And I missed it entirely, and so did Jeff, so it's okay. But
Encrypted.
It must have been quite quiet. I did later find an obituary when I
It's such a
went.
sad thing to find out about a favorite
And I was
author.
like halfway through it, and I'm like, oh my God, the lens through which I was reading it
Yeah,
changed,
all of a
knowing
sudden
he
it
wasn't
becomes poignant
there.
in a different way, yeah.
It was. But I feel like this was a really nice end to his writing career. So he, like I said, he moved to Provence. He's written several books. The first one was A Year in Provence, and then Toujours Provence, Provence A to Z. And he talks a lot about how the region has changed in this particular book from when he moved to when he was writing this, which I think he wrote this in like 2016. And it's really interesting because in some ways it's changed a lot, and in other ways it's exactly the same. But a lot, because it ended up on my food list, because he talks a lot about the wine and a lot about how people generally in French culture, and I think a lot of European cultures, they enjoy food in a way that we don't necessarily here.
And markets.
And markets,
like that.
and the market is the same. It's you go there on the weekend. It's the same people. It's like that has not changed, and hopefully never will, because that's one of my favorite parts of France. But he talks about rosé wine and how when he first moved there, it was kind of this. Like you had it on tap practically, but it was like the farmers drank it. And now, I mean, here you go, and there's like a whole separate rosé list at like the pub around the corner. I mean, it's not. It's
and in
become,
France too. It's
and
not
become
just,
and in
it's
France
not
too.
just- yeah.
It's a thing. But I mean,
It's
even
a
all
thing.
the way here, it's a thing. But he also writes. So Peter Mayle also wrote some fiction. That's also very enjoyable. It's his main series was about Sam Levitt, who is it's a beach read. He was a corporate lawyer turned like crime expert, and he solves cases kind of a private detective sort of way, but he doesn't call himself that, for millionaires, and ends up. The book's all about him solving this crime whilst on their yacht in Cap Antibes, and
Drinking really good rosés.
drinking really good rosé.
We should all be so lucky.
We should all be so lucky, but I mean, it's totally ridiculous. But it's fun. It's fun and it's light. They're all capers: the vintage caper, the Marseille caper. It's great. But this one did become very poignant for me when I found out he was no longer here and would not be writing anymore. But it was a nice fitting end. It was really lovely. It was a nice summary. He's a good, he captures the Provence beautifully. He captures the French people beautifully. He has unbelievable anecdotes about some of the people in his town. And
sometimes the best writers of that kind of stuff are the ones who come from outside.
Because
yes. they can see
have
it
a
with a
perspective.
little different of perspective than the locals.
Absolutely.
And the things that have changed. A lot of the cafes have started catering more to the tourists than to the locals. But there's still those markets. There's still the elderly men drinking their pasty, playing boules. It was lovely, and I thought it was charming. And I think if you've ever read anything by him, you would enjoy this one.
Yeah, and there's so many writers who've written about sort of Italy or France.
I feel like he really started a lot of
right.
that.
I agree.
He was
back in the day, really back in the day when he
And
first.
I mean,
Right.
Provence has always been famous and trendy and so forth, but I think the part that he lives in, I remember going to the
very
village
off. It's not like
that he was
Cannes
in
or-
was kind of, it's like inland, it's the
Right.
the Luberon Mountains, and like I think because of him, it's become such a huge thing
he had to
do
move.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, he in the
God.
first book very explicitly says where he lives and described his house, and it got so much attention they moved and
sure the
left for
neighbors
4
were thrilled,
years
right? Yeah.
and came back and
Wow.
didn't tell anyone where they lived.
Yeah.
So that was Peter Mayle's My 25 Years in Provence.
Great.
Enfin.
Enfin. Farewell, Peter.
Is his house for sale?
For a
Yeah.
pretty penny, I'm sure. Okay, Beth?
Yeah, so
have
my
upcoming?
list is about books that have either just been published or are about to be published.
And this is fiction.
And this is fiction, and so it encompasses science fiction, mystery, historical, romance, a little bit of everything, pretty much. And the one I want to tell you about is called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. And the first thing you need to know about this book is that it's beautifully written, which makes sense because he is, Vuong is a prize-winning poet. And basically the novel is a poem in prose form. And he structures it as a letter from the main character, who's nicknamed Little Dog, to his illiterate mother. So just think about that a second. He's writing to his illiterate mother. And that's the way a lot of the book is. He fills it with these contradictions that you don't think of as going together. Love and hate, freedom and imprisonment, all these contradictions. And he gets them all on the same page, the same plane, even the same thought. So Little Dog is writing to his mother to explain his life to her and to himself. So most of the novel is retrospective. He talks about the traumatized childhood of his mother, the life of his grandmother, and then he goes up to present day where he talks about how he falls in love with this other young man who he meets picking tobacco in Hartford. Now, I didn't know they had tobacco farms in Hartford, but yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, it hasn't been there for a while, but when I was, my mother's family was from around that area, so we would take trips all the time, and we would drive through
fields,
like really rich red soil with endless tobacco fields.
I had no idea.
And I remember that when I was little, but it's been years since
Because I
they
used
did
to
that.
drive through them in the south when I was a
Yeah.
kid, but
And
I
now
didn't.
it's all,
Yeah.
suburb developments
I
and
thought it
stuff.
wasn't warm enough.
Yeah. Anyway, onwards,
Yeah.
Beth.
So
Fun facts.
I know. So we also hear about the remembered violence of the Vietnam War. That's where he's originally from, and his mother and grandmother. So this is a quote. I'm sorry. He's talking about his mother. Little Dog is talking about his mother. Quote, "I didn't know that the war was still inside you, that once it enters you, it never leaves, but merely echoes, a sound, forming the face of your own son." Again, so it's a beautifully written book, but as you heard, it's also hard. It's not an easy read. It can be harrowing at times. After all, he's writing about the war. He's writing about his grandmother having to work as a sex worker. He's writing about being bullied at school and having to face homophobia. But remember, he balances things. So there's all that part of it, but then he's talking about illuminescent love, and the brief beauty of a butterfly or a sunset or our lives. If you read for character, still an amazing book. There are basically 4 characters: Little Dog, his mom, his grandmother, and his love. And he writes just so beautifully. They're very detailed, very vivid descriptions. And he writes beautifully about Hartford, actually rural working class Hartford, and also Vietnam. So the setting is also well done.
I read it as well this past weekend, and there's a lot about the opioid crisis and how it's affecting all kinds of people,
but especially the working class.
Especially the working class.
Wow.
Yeah, so in this slim volume, he packs all that in, as well as the themes of racism, classism, homophobia, war, masculinity. He does it all with a lot of grace and with a lot of compassion. So it's been getting a lot of buzz.
A
It's
lot of
really
buzz. Everyone's
worth
talking about it.
It's really
And I
deserves
can see why
it.
I grabbed it over the weekend and flew through it in like a
Yeah.
day.
Oh,
It's-
it's
It
not.
is. It's very
It's one
short
of your
and
under 300 books.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only 200, not even 250.
The writing is really
Wow.
exquisite.
It's just beautiful.
I can't wait.
If you want books that are similar, this one might not be on the shelf. You could read Fugitive Pieces by Anne Michaels. That's a World War II book about immigration. Then there's also the Ha Yin book, Free Life. That's about leaving China. And then there's Odysseus Abroad by Amit Chaudhry, which is about leaving India. But if you want another Vietnam book, there's the one you did in book club, The Sympathizer.
The Sympathizer.
By Viet Thanh new way, which I think they're very different books from what you've said.
Very different. It's hugely
but
different.
Still, the topic of Vietnam, it's a good
Yeah.
good read-alike in that way.
Yeah, Yuan's way more, he's not, I mean, he's a poet in a different way, but he's not that kind of lyrical
Right.
writer.
And it's much, it's like 500
Oh,
pages?
it's huge.
Yeah.
And it's pretty dense.
Yeah.
Mhm. Very different. Great, that sounds like a
That's
nice one for the
wonderful.
list. Thank you.
It was such a pleasure to read.
I bet. I bet it was. So my list is, like Beth's, it has a little bit of everything. It's got, it's kind of, in some ways, my best of for the last, I don't know, 6 or 9 months. It's got a little bit of sort of general sort of fiction. It's got fantasy. It's got humor. It's got a memoir. And various other things. I do have a little bit of a caveat because I did not put any mysteries on there. I apologize to all you mystery readers. Next time
That's okay,
we
I
will
have
get
some on
you.
mine.
That's right. There you go. Beth's got some. And it also has short stories, and that's what I want to talk about today. My book, which I didn't have a copy of, it sort of asks you to imagine walking down a crowded city street, like really crowded, like Beijing or New York or London, and having the ability to briefly inhabit each of the people that you pass on the street, thinking their thoughts, feeling their feelings as intensely as they do, but just for a few moments each. And that is the kind of premise behind this book, which is called Joy and 52 Other Very Short Stories. So think of that. That's 53 short stories in this one book. So that makes each one of them only about 3 to 5 pages. I think there might have been one that was 6. So they are very short, and they drop you into the middle of someone's life. That there's that fancy literary phrase, in media res. It's like right in the middle of the action, right in the middle of their thoughts, and it's all in the first person. So that gives you a lot of intensity of feeling. They are not necessarily reliable narrators about their own lives and their own relationships. And she does mostly use relationships to kind of get these personalities across. You have, for instance, people who are caretakers of other sick people or disabled people. You have people who are clerks in stores. You have husbands commenting on wives, wives commenting on husbands. So this is how she pulls out the details that tell you about this person that you are learning about. They are very good to read in bite-sized chunks because, as you can imagine, they're like...
Yeah.
They're pretty intense, and you'll come to one and maybe you like this one, but you like this one even better, and you kind of want to mull it over a little bit after you read it. So good one to keep by your bedside and just read alongside something else. And her genius, Erin, I didn't say the author's name. Her name is Erin McGraw. Her genius is both in those details that draw you right into the character, but also in the range of the characters that are depicted in the book. So we have everything from Ava Gardner, who's the famous 1940s, 50s actress, coming home from Hollywood, her glamorous life in Hollywood, to her small town in North Carolina where she grew up, with her husband, Frank Sinatra, in tow. And there's a potluck, and there's Frank and Ava at this potluck, in all these people like looking at them like, oh, and it's just, you just imagine that situation. So that's one. There's the advice columnist who's sure he's just received a letter written by his own wife about her feelings about their marriage, which isn't going so well. And there's the daughter who knows that her father is the criminal in question. And I'm going to read a little bit just so you get the idea of how she does what she does. This story where the daughter understands that it's her father who committed this crime is called Snitch. And it starts, I tell the newswoman the same thing I tell everybody. I knew it was my father. I just knew. Were you frightened to go to the police, or was it a relief? The newswoman asks. I wonder where she got the idea that those things are different. Then there's also the hand model with a drinking problem. I mean, who writes about hand models, right? I mean, like, do you ever think about even hand models? Those people who hold the product and you never see their face. So here's her story, just the beginning of her story. She's called Artist. After a long shoot, my shoulders and back ache, and if anybody can tell me about a bar nearby, I head straight over. The facies, that's the face models, right? The facies don't go because they've already had their 800 calories for the day, but the hand model is allowed to drink beer. Just don't let my fingers get cut, I tell the bartenders who open bottles for me. Sometimes, if I've been there for a while, I copy the old frat boy trick and open the bottle with my teeth. Nobody cares about my teeth. So those are the kinds of things that you get in each one of these. Some of them are kind of surreal, some of them are sublime, and some of them are mundane. Some of them are about love, some are about murder, some are about boredom, loneliness. You just get the whole range. They're funny, they're heartbreaking, some are downright disturbing. And a few of them are in kind of linked sets, so you'll get like the same situation commented on from 3 different points of view, and you start to wonder who's telling the truth or what the truth is. But overall, the writing is perfection. It's almost like she set out to, in an experiment to kind of show you in little bite-sized pieces what the full power of the short story is. And so you end up with this kind of smorgasbord of powerful characterizations that I highly recommend. Great one for the beach, again, because you can just dip in and dip out. So that's Joy and 52 other very short stories by Erin McGraw. And we should also talk about the 6th list. The missing 6th librarian is Megan.
The ghost librarian.
The ghost librarian. Yeah, maybe we should have a cardboard cutout for her. She would love that.
She'd love that.
Yeah. Megan has created a list that also, because we don't, I mean, Jackie's list is nonfiction, obviously, but it's very, well, not all of it. Yeah. It's pretty specific to food, but Megan's has both fiction and nonfiction on it. So that's one place where you will find, I mean, I do have one memoir on mine. So for those of you who are interested in nonfiction, and there are lots of good reads on there. So make sure you look out for all of those books, as well as ours. And now I want to sort of throw it out to the crowd and let anybody who wants to talk about either 1 or 2 other books from your list that you really wanted to call out and let people know about. Did you want to, Jeff?
I'd love to talk about Good Omens.
Oh, yeah, you have to talk about Good Omens, because that's just come out as a TV series,
yeah,
right?
it was just like
Have
just
you
last
seen
month.
the TV too?
I've started it.
Okay.
There's several episodes, and I've only seen the first one, but I can tell it's a pretty good adaptation. For those of you who don't know anything about it, it's actually really old. It's from 1990, and it's a collaboration between 2 very quirky kind of fantasy writers, Neil Gaiman, who's still popular right now, and Terry Pratchett, who died a number of years ago. And people who like them really like them.
He was still alive.
Terry Pratchett?
No, another person who didn't realize.
Yes, oh no.
He died of Alzheimer's.
Yes, I thought he was still alive.
But they collaborated. This is actually very early on, because it's like 30 years ago now. They collaborated on this story, and it has just, after all this time, been turned into a miniseries on Amazon.
Right.
So it just came out last month. And it's about, it's funny as hell, and pun intended, because it's about the apocalypse. And it's probably the funniest book you will ever read about the apocalypse. There are 2 main characters. And they're played by 2 really good and well-known British actors. It's very British in its sensibility, because they're both British writers, and the humor is very British. So there's an angel and a demon. The angel is Michael Sheen, and the demon is
David
Tennant, yes, who we all know from Doctor Who and from Broadchurch, 2 completely different things, and now he's doing something even more different. These are
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
He's in Harry
He
Potter.
was, yeah, he actually.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
He played a Harry Potter character.
Yes, he did.
But so the idea behind this is the apocalypse is coming Saturday. Around dinner.
Don't forget it. Don't forget.
And you need to be prepared. And the thing is, the two characters, Crowley and Aziraphale, who are they're kind of friends, even though they're supposedly on the opposite side. And they've both lived here for all this time, and they've kind of gotten used to the way life is now. So they've decided, maybe the apocalypse isn't so great after all. So they're trying to kind of find ways to stop it.
Right.
But mayhem ensues, and part of the problem is that they've lost the Antichrist because he got switched at the convent, and like they've been trying to nurture and the Antichrist all these years, only it's the wrong kid. And so it's about as hysterically funny as you can imagine the apocalypse being.
Right.
And the TV series, in addition to the 2 of them who are great actors, they've got John Hamm from Mad Men, who looks exactly the same. He plays the angel Gabriel in a suit, looking exactly the same way. And Frances McDormand plays God. So you
that
can't
is
go
the
wrong.
best thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
So it's
and
very
I
funny.
will say that there are a couple of different audio versions of this. One is the book being read by a single presenter, and I can't comment on how good or not that is. But the other thing that I found the other day is a BBC Radio 4, which if you've ever known anything about England, Radio 4 does all amazing storytelling, and they do all these, like, they do radio like it used to be done back in the day. You know, they still have these fully dramatized
With sound
radio
effects
with
and
sound
all that
effects
kind
and
of stuff.
everything.
Cool.
They've done that for this, and it's supposed to be really, really good. So you can listen to the whole thing as a complete dramatization.
It is very good. It has,
Oh, you have?
I listened to it when it came out because I'm a fan of the book, and
Yeah.
it has in that Peter Serafinowicz plays Crowley, so you can imagine.
Yeah. I think if you're not sure of that kind of quirky fantasy genre, this is a good entree where you
Right,
you
just
can,
because it's funny.
It's just so
partly.
funny.
It doesn't take itself seriously
Yeah.
at all. Because I can't. I think part of the reason that this is making it out there at the moment is because Neil Gaiman's other, his other American Gods has been pretty popular,
Yeah.
and
Right.
it's coming into its second season on TV. So I think that's this one's probably getting in on the back of that, but which is a good thing, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, and he wasn't going to. There'd been all these attempts to adapt it, like Terry Gilliam from Monty Python was going to make a movie, and there was another sort of movie, and they weren't going to do it. And actually, after Terry Pratchett's death, he received a posthumous letter he sent a letter, like Neil Gaiman received
Oh
a
my
letter from
God.
Terry Pratchett that was
Really?
like, you should do this as a TV show, and he did. So that's actually
there
why
you
it is.
go.
So
That's
it
why it
was
actually
that he
came
had
out.
written this letter, and then after he died, it was sent by his family to Neil Gaiman.
All right, we don't have a whole lot of time left, so anybody else
else?
have
Yeah,
some
yeah,
shout outs? Oh, Beth's got another one.
I'm going to just do quick. I want to tell you about The Lost Letters of William Woolf by Helen Cullen, and that's a read-alike for The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry, if you'd like that. He's the main character works in the depot of lost letters and tries to find the owners. That's the first half of the book. And then there's, if you like the Scandinavian mysteries, Beyond All Reasonable Doubt by Malin Giolito, I think is her name. That's really good. I'm currently reading The Darwin Affair by Tim Mason. It's a historical mystery, and it's just sucked me right in. It's takes place. During Darwin's time, Darwin Affair, and I just haven't been able to put it down. And then I think there was more. Oh, I just wanted to let people know it's not out yet. It will be out in July. The Wanderers by Chuck Wendig. That's sci-fi. So he's a really well-known sci-fi. So if you like sci-fi, look forward to that.
I want to call out one called "This Is How It Always Is," which is a great read. We're just about to the end of Pride Month, but we're still in it, and it's a good time to start it as any. It's a lovely family novel, beautifully written characters, the way they deal with each other, and it's all about bringing up a transgender child. So really fantastic by the author Laurie Frankel, who actually herself has a child who was born presenting as a boy and became a girl. And so it's just, I think, a really, really great way into that whole place in life that is getting talked about a lot now, and a great way for people to understand a very different perspective, maybe than your own. So, anybody else? No?
Brigid, do you have recursion on your list?
I don't, because I do not have that. Did it just come out?
It just came out.
Yeah. and
So we're talking about Recursion by
Blake Crouch.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll give a really quick, if you want some different speculative fiction that's not as sort of spaceship heavy, you might want to try Station 11. A lot of people have read it.
that
It's
was
about
so
a
good.
flu
Great.
pandemic by Emily St. John Mandel. So it's definitely speculative, but no spaceships. Or Connie Willis's Blackout and All Clear, which are time travel, but also sort of historical fiction about World War II.
Okay, so if you liked Outlander, for instance.
Yes, exactly. If you
There's
liked
a good-
Outlander,
there's
that
a
might be.
good
Or if you ever read Connie Willis's Doomsday Book, which is
Great
also about
book.
time travel, but that's
Yeah.
to the Middle Ages. So this is World War II.
Okay, so I think we are out of time now, but we will be taking a break for the summer, but we'll be back in September with another of our regular editions of Book Buzz. We wanted to thank you for joining us, and remember that anytime you need a new book, your librarians are more than happy to talk to you in person, by email, by phone, any old way that you want, and to give you recommendations for your next great read. So please come to the library and visit us there, and we will see you next time on Book Buzz. Thank you, everybody.